great to have you back. We're going to talk about Chapter 4 today from True Measure of a Man by Richard E. Simmons III, Birmingham, Alabama. The title of this chapter is A Man's Courage. So I am commenting on Richard's book and want to lead you through your study. I hope your study's going well. Remember that you can contact me with the email that's below here, and would love for you to give me an email. Let me know how you're doing. The chapter opens up with a quote from Tim Keller, and it says this: we all have a basic motivational drive. Every human heart has something that drives it. It gets us through life. It moves us to do what we would do, and for most of us, I believe, it is fear. Keller's comment. Fear of what? What are we afraid of? On page 41, Simmons tells us that our fear is generally nothing more than living out the future before it arrives and taking steps to avoid the negative outcomes that we imagine are likely to occur, most of which never occur. What are we worried about? We invent circumstances in our minds that are a lot worse than reality. So why do we do that? Why do we worry? Larry Crabb on page 42 says this, that we have two basic psychological needs in our lives: the need for security and the need for significance. Simmons goes on to discuss that women worry about security and men worry about significance. Interestingly to me is that while men worry about significance, they get stressed and anxious and fearful, causing the woman in their life to now begin to fear for her security, not knowing what her anxious husband may or may not do. We just discussed this chapter 3 on measuring up. Do I measure up? We must first ask this question: on what scale am I being measured? If it is the world of success and comfort, then no, you probably don't measure up, because somewhere out there has got more money and more comfort than you do. But if it is the scale of God loving and creating you, if it is the audience of one for whom you perform, and that's the audience of God, then you wind up at the top of the scale because God created you just as He wanted you. Soren Kierkegaard, I think he was on my bowling team. But anyway, he's quoted on page 43, everyone must find a way to justify their existence. Everyone must find a way to justify their existence. We all want to be needed and to be found productive. Simmons on page 45 continues this discussion. And he says that men are so afraid of not succeeding, not being found productive, their chief drive is simply not to fail. The fear of failure creates two issues in our lives. One issue is that we have shallow relationships, and the second one is that this fear of failure causes us to play it safe. And ironically, both of these lead to an unproductive life. You take a look at the famous quote on page 47 by Theodore Roosevelt. It's too long for me to read, but boy, it's worth reading and studying. And he just says this: great accomplishments occur when men step out of their comfort zone and probably into the eye of criticism. Old Teddy wasn't afraid of being criticized. The criticism is reserved for those who are attempting to do the difficult, and it is those men who leave a lasting legacy of courage. Remember the title of the chapter? Man's courage. We may have to struggle for meaning. The story from Colson's book, Kingdoms in Conflict. What a great book that Charles Colson wrote. But in Kingdoms in Conflict, he reminds us that meaninglessness may kill us. So read that little expose there on 49 and 50. On 52, we have the quote by Simmons. In the midst of storms of life, we will either allow what we are experiencing to influence our view of God, or we will allow our view of God to influence what we are experiencing. And that quote on page 52, I want you to think about that and talk about it. I would add this quote from Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I believe he was in my bowling team too, but the shirt couldn't fit his name on the back. He says, I bless you, prison. I bless you for being in my life, for there on rotting prison straw, I learned the object of life is not prosperity, as I had grown up believing, but the maturing of the soul. Simmons asks us on page 53, what is the great object of life? Is it comfort, pleasure, prosperity? Or how about this? Is it the transformation of our character through knowing and glorifying God? I'm going to ask you to read Romans 8, 28 and 29, and you should do that, and I'll get to that in just a second. Finally, page 56, he says, the great lesson of human history is that people are always looking for something else, anything else, to give them significance and security. For so many men in the world of business and commerce, God is not an option for that. And he closes out his chapter with this quote, so many men spend their lives looking for some other stream to finally and forever quench their thirst of their souls. However, Jesus says, there is no other stream. He is very clear about the fact that if we do not drink from this stream, his stream, the fountain of living water, we will die. 4 questions. Number 1, what was your greatest fear as a kid? And what is your greatest fear now? Second, are those around you struggling with a fear of having no significance? Hint, they are. What message would you give them? Do you reach points, number 3, do you reach points in your life when boredom and meaninglessness get to you? How do you fight it? By the way, we all have boredom and meaninglessness, but does it get to us, and how do you fight that? Finally, read Romans 8, 28 and 29, always 29 with 28. What is our hope for difficult times? I hope you'll find some great hope in your group, in this study, and in the Scripture. Thanks.